Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the content patch for the 13th of June 2013. My name is TotalBiscuit with today's gaming news and comment. Coming up in the show, new Warhammer 40,000 MMORPG has been revealed at E3. Not the company you were hoping for. Jack Tretton of Sony confirms that third parties can implement online DRM for PlayStation 4 games. AMD has announced the first processor to break the 5 GHz barrier. And Nintendo's E3 episode of their Direct show announces several new titles. All this and the OC Remix track of the day is coming your way right about now. The previously announced 40K MMO by the name of Dark Millennium has vanished off the map, its developer, of course, having been dissolved as a result of THQ's bankruptcy. They were in charge of dealing with Dark Millennium, and the license was in the hands of THQ. However, it would appear that the owner of the IP Games Workshop has decided to give a new license for another MMO to a company called Behavior. They will be developing a title by the name of Eternal Crusade. And they're targeting next-generation platforms, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC. The game is planned to feature 4 initial factions, Space Marines, Chaos Space Marines, Orcs, and Eldar, and will be a behind-the-shoulder third-person game. Now, as to what exactly that entails, not really clear. There's no actual footage of this game as of yet. It would appear that they're looking to try and do some kind of MMO third-person shooter, even though it's being described as an MMORPG. The game supposedly features massive conflicts, which simultaneously bring thousands of players to bear over territories and other strategic resources, and there will also be melee combat in the game as well as vehicular combat in a supposed persistent online war. Now, Behavior's got an interesting reputation. By interesting reputation, I mean it has a terrible reputation for the most part. Behavior has been responsible for some of the worst shovelware I personally have ever had the displeasure to see. And that really does worry me quite a lot. It would appear that this company does not have a huge amount of experience developing anything that doesn't suck. These are the guys behind Naughty Bear, as well as the sequel to Naughty Bear. Other great games such as Swing the Panda, Brave, Antique Hunter, Wipeout 3, no, not the racing game, the quiz game, Chipmunks Chipwrecked, Ghostbusters Sanctum of Slime. The list of terrible games really just keeps going on and on and on. That said, Behavior Interactive has been doing a couple of interesting things lately. For instance, they've been brought on as a partner for Star Citizen's development. And there are also claims that the Eternal Crusade team are all MMO development veterans. And with the support of Behavior's 20 years of experience, it's going to be the online Warhammer 40,000 universe game that fans have been dreaming of for years, blah, 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 according to them, yeah? That's according to Miguel Karen, who is the head of studio. Who are they bringing on for this? Because, Behavior has a really, really bad resume. Incredibly bad resume. They really don't actually have any good games on there at all. And they've been working for a long, long time. Now, is it that they actually are just a bunch of talented devs that are given shovelware all the time, not enough time to develop it? Well, I don't think so. You can make excuses like that, but in reality, you would think at least one of those games would actually be decent, but it's not. I mean, they have made a lot of very bad games indeed. If they are the primary developers on this and they haven't brought in a ton of talent, then I have to wonder why on earth they got saddled with this. They haven't made an MMO before, at any point. MMOs are incredibly risky, incredibly expensive, and generally speaking, if you want to make a good one, you've got to have a lot of talent. I suppose the question then becomes, who is it that they're bringing into play here? I'm gonna be frank, I am, as a Warhammer 40,000 buff, at least I like to think of it, I read tons of their trashy novels, I love the lore of Warhammer 40,000, one of my favorite universes. I am definitely not optimistic for this. I mean, Warhammer games have been touch and go for a while, honestly. Some of them have been okay, some of them haven't. Lately, we've had stuff like Space Marine and Dawn of War 2, which have been really, really good. And then we've had some other stuff like that crappy Xbox Live game that absolutely sucked. They didn't go back in time and look at the other stuff, and it's not really been a good ride for Warhammer 40,000 fans, honestly. So, we'll see, but I am very, very doubtful that this is going to end up being any good. Ideally hope that I'm proved wrong, though. I really do. It feels like a broken record talking about this, but considering the amount of misinformation that's flying around, I think it's pretty damn important. So, Jack Tretton, who was the guy that spent most of his time on stage during the PlayStation 4 conference, has spoken to Game Trailers TV, specifically to Jeff Keighley, on the subject of PlayStation 4 used games as well as always-on DRM. So, this is a flat-out confirmation of what we knew in February, yeah? This is before all the protests started, before all the hashtagging started, and he specifically has said, well, we create the platform, we've certainly stated that with our first-party games we're not going to be doing that, referring to online passes and so on and so forth, but we welcome publishers and their business models to our platform. There's going to be free-to-play, every potential business model on there, and again, that's up to the relationship with the consumer and what they think is going to put them in the best stead. So we're not going to dictate that. We're going to give them a platform to publish on. Now, Keighley pressed the issue, saying, well, will the Sony platform allow for DRM for third-party games? And the response was, the DRM decision is going to have to be in the hands of the third parties. That's not something we're going to dictate or control or mandate or implement. So there you go. I mean, this is something that we knew back in February, it was confirmed, but at least we now know for sure. This is straight from the horse's mouth there. However, that would be a little bit too easy, wouldn't it? The inconsistency continues, so... This is only from one source, technically speaking, which is why it does put a little bit of doubt into my mind. So, a site called PlayStationLifestyle.net, which seems to be the only source for this particular piece of information. I did Google the quote. This is the only site that has it, aside from NeoGAF that copy and pasted it. NeoGAF, by the way, are the forum that originated the PlayStation 4 hashtag campaign, which, if this quote is to be believed, was actually a success. So the quote goes something like this. Moving on to the gamers themselves, specifically the campaign, Adam was actually in a meeting with Jack Tretton when it was trending, that being the hashtag PS4 DRM thing. And he got on his whiteboard, putting, here's the world, here's what we're leaning towards right now, and here's the feedback. So we're leaning in that direction, just lock it in. However, this is contradicted by an article that was posted on Polygon, PlayStation Lifestyle, Gama Sutra, Game Politics, Forbes, and a bunch of other websites, which has the following quote. This is originally in an interview with Polygon, and it's from Sony's VP of Worldwide Studios, and he said, it's something that we believe in. We know gamers come first. We know what they want. I was personally overwhelmed with the massive explosion on Twitter with everyone essentially begging, please don't do this, Sony. Please don't do this, PlayStation. It was so hard not to say right away, well, we were never going to do that anyway, but now let's have a little fun and announce it in a fun way at the PlayStation press conference. So we have that quote from PlayStation Lifestyle that can't really be found anywhere else. There doesn't appear to be a second source on that. And then we have the quote from Polygon, which is on about 20 other websites. As to which one of these is true, it's hard to say. The problem is that the PR machine is in full swing right now and is causing some misinformation to come out. Now, this isn't the most important piece of potential misinformation. It's the notion of the online pass, and we do need some clarification on that. There are two pieces of information floating around about this, quoted on various websites that kind of clash with each other. The first one is the idea that they're getting rid of online passes for first-party games only. Third-party publishers can kind of do what they want. However, information on the Giant Bomb podcast with Scott Rode, who is the VP of Worldwide Studios, said they're doing away with the online pass system for both first-party and third-party developers, and the reason for that is the PlayStation Plus multiplayer requirement with you having to pay pretty much already covers that, so Sony will not allow companies to double dip. Which of these is true? Let's go with the assumption right now that third parties can use an online pass or online pass-like system. So the current system with the PlayStation 4 would not allow for any kind of real single-player authentication. That's pretty much being confirmed there. But what they will allow is the use of online passes. The thing is that not a lot of companies have actually used that, and a lot of companies are in fact moving away from it. EA has recently dropped its online pass program completely. The Sony online passes, which were actually a thing, they've been a thing for almost every game, they're being dropped too. They've said that, they're not going to restrict it in that way. So I have to wonder exactly who would stick with it, and if they do stick with it, will there be significant enough protests to stop that from happening? I've said it time and time again, I don't have a problem with online passes. The only issue I really have with them is the bloody inconvenience. Typing in a 25-digit code in a gamepad is not fun, especially not when it's alphanumeric, which it generally is. No. But yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it down in stone. That's what we knew in February, but we now have complete confirmation of it. So that puts us in a really interesting situation where there is enforced DRM on one system and not on the other. The question, I suppose, then becomes, what's the next play? Do we see publishers migrating towards the Xbox because they actually believe that the restriction of used games will be good for them in the long run? Or do we see gamers migrating to the PlayStation 4 and publishers forced to actually put those games on that system because that's where they'll actually sell? Really interesting paradigm. I think we'll get to learn once and for all just what effect used games really have on the industry. I'm personally very much looking forward to finding out. AMD has announced the new CPU, the FX 9590, an 8-core CPU with a base clock of 4.7 GHz. The CPU itself will actually exceed the 5 GHz mark using the turbo core technology and will also be fully unlocked, allowing for even more overclocking if you have the cooling to do so. The bad news is that it will only initially be available to system integrators. That means you will not be able to buy it on your own. Speculation indicates that the CPU requires some fairly hefty cooling and they don't want to make it available on the market just yet. The CPU will use the AM3 Plus socket and is claimed to be about 17.5% faster than the FX8350, their current flagship technology. This is really interesting to watch, actually, considering that they announced this a couple of days after the new generation of i7s. Now, the i7-4s, also known as the Haswell, were announced and were met with a fairly muted response from enthusiasts simply because they didn't see a really big jump in actual performance. Now, AMD has been lagging behind Intel for the past couple of generations, with the i7s really being the go-to CPU if you're looking for a really powerful chip. AMD not really able to compete in that respect and have been trying to compete in the price-performance market, which has always been their greatest strength. However, it looks like AMD might be playing a little bit of catch-up here, and of course with the big deals with both Sony and Microsoft for the Jaguar APU used in both the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, it looks like these guys might be right back in the fight again. I need to make it abundantly clear that this is a very, very good thing indeed. It's extremely good. The reason it's extremely good is because having one dominant CPU manufacturer is not a good thing indeed. It generally slows down innovation and technological advancement. You do need that competition to really push forward. As it stands, we've been in what I would describe as a period of stagnation for enthusiasts and top-end PCs for the last couple of years, and I'm looking forward to seeing what will end up happening here. I also would like to point out that raw clock speed wasn't really that important in the last couple of generations of CPU. The architecture's very much shifted. Back in single core, it used to be a battle for clock speed, right? It was all about just how fast the actual CPU would go. These days, not so much. However, I'll tell you this for a fact, we have not seen a major gaming advancement as a direct result of going quad or hexacore CPU, and that's mostly because a lot of games really don't support it all that well. StarCraft 2 is a prime example of a game that has major frame rate spikes even on my system, right? That will only use about 2 of your cores. You really can't have it use any more than that, and there are plenty of other games that have that same problem. Raw clock speed actually does help more in that situation than anything else. So I am looking forward to seeing how this goes. I mean, honestly, if this thing ends up benching higher than what I've currently got and actually looks like a significant jump, I may very well go back to AMD. And I think the last time I used AMD was actually back in the single-core Barton era. I used to run the 2500, the mobile Barton. I overclocked the crap out of that thing with... Man, I used to run that on an Acer Star Ice, this gigantic turbine of a cooler. Huge thing, massive. Made a huge amount of noise if you turned it all the way up to full as well. Hell, I think you could have made the bloody thing lift off, but that was back in those days. And ever since then, I've been Intel all the way, simply because it's been the best option for me, but... competition is hotting up again. That's good. I'm looking forward to seeing the benchmarks on this thing, and let's see if it really is competitive. Currently, the highest clock speed CPU in the Haswell range is, in fact, the 4930MX, which is 3 GHz. However, bear in mind, of course, the clock speed is not everything, so we'll need to see just what happens when you put both of these CPUs against each other and fight it out in real-world applications. And finally, while Nintendo decided not to do a conference at E3, they did do a Nintendo Direct episode from E3 itself with several new announcements. They did announce what we thought was coming, a new Smash Brothers game. They also announced some of the characters that would be in it. We'll come on to that in a little bit. Other announcements included Wii Party U, which appears to be a spin-off of Mario Party with more of the Wii U specific gamepad versus other guys on Wiimote kind of functionality. Mario Kart 8, which will be out in spring 2014. A new Yoshi's Island title for the 3DS, as well as a new installment of the Donkey Kong Country series, which I would assume would be made by Retro Studios that made Donkey Kong Country Returns, which is a damn good game and ridiculously hard. They also showed off new footage of Bayonetta 2, as well as the Wonderful 101, both from Platinum Games. More footage of X, which is the spiritual successor to Xenoblade by Monolith Soft. And they've confirmed that the name of the new Zelda title for the 3DS will be A Link Between Worlds. Now, of course, the biggest announcement was Super Smash Bros., which we'd been expecting for quite some time, but it did roll along, and it looks like it'll be on 3DS and Wii U with some kind of cross-compatibility. The new characters included will be Mega Man, as well as the Wii Fit Trainer, which is an interesting little decision there. They'll also be bringing along the villager from Animal Crossing. We may very well expect a few more to come along in the not-too-distant future. The game is looking pretty impressive, honestly, from a graphical standpoint, and it's going to be that one killer app that hopefully sells an awful lot of systems for them. At least that's what they're hoping. I definitely don't blame them. They do need something along those lines, and Smash Bros. Has traditionally been a pretty damn good system seller for all kinds of gamers. You know, it's very much a casual fighting game, but something that is very much enjoyed by the competitive scene as well as more hardcore gamers as well. So good to actually get that out there. Of course, it was the final thing that they announced. I mean, I'm looking forward to playing it. I always look forward to playing those games. I'm not a huge fan of them by any stretch, but they're fun, and there's no real doubt about that. Admittedly, I can expect to see an awful lot of people complaining that you can't by default use the GameCube controller now with the Wii U, although it is possible to get an adapter to do that. The classic controller is probably good enough for it, but still something that may annoy a few people. The stuff I was really interested in during that episode of Nintendo Direct was actually the Platinum stuff. Platinum don't make bad games at all. It just doesn't happen. So Wonderful 101 is looking like a really interesting game indeed. It's very hard to describe that. I think it's probably closest to Pikmin more so than anything else, but the idea is that you have a very large group of very small superheroes fighting really big alien invaders, and you combine yourselves together to form different weapons. Now, supposedly you can do that by drawing symbols on the gamepad controller, and there is, in fact, a 5-player multiplayer mode. 5-player seems to be a thing that Wii U is starting to push, considering that it supports the gamepad and up to 4 Wii remotes or classic controllers. So that's an interesting little spin on it, and the whole couch multiplayer is definitely not being pushed by either of the other two consoles right now, so it may be an edge that the system currently has. Bayonetta 2 is looking as good as you would expect there, and of course the complaints will continue that it is a Wii U exclusive, but we should bear in mind that the game wouldn't have happened if Nintendo wasn't actually paying for it. So something I'm definitely looking forward to playing on my Wii U. It's probably going to be that big hardcore killer app for me that actually gets me using the system and dusts it off a little bit. Aside from that, it looked like a pretty strong announcement of first-party titles, but conspicuous by its absence, with the exception, of course, of X, would be major third-party support with actual exclusive titles. There is stuff like Sonic Lost Worlds. Sonic games generally not system sellers, although the reputation of Sonic has been slowly rebuilt over the last couple of games that haven't actually sucked. So we'll see how well that actually does. I mean, all credit to it, it does look pretty good. The Wii U's just kind of slowly trucking along here. They announced a number of delays for various titles as well, which is to be expected, although the longer they delay this stuff, the worse it's really going to get for them. I said it before, I very much like to compare this to the Dreamcast, whereby they had this period of time to establish themselves before the more powerful console came along and stomped all over their face. Unfortunately, this time around, they're looking at 2 more powerful consoles that we know are pretty much going to come out in November. So they've got until then to really establish themselves and actually say, yeah, this is a good family console. It is definitely the cheapest console, and we might even see an actual price drop here. That's a possibility. If they have a good lineup of things that actually attract people to the machine, then yes, they could do very well, and we could very well see this lower tier of machine actually be competitive. But it does seem to me that they might end up having to go back to what they did with the Wii, which was to appeal to the more casual audience, while the other two consoles swept away all of the core gamers. If that happens, then it's certainly not going to be a system that I'm going to be using all that much, and that would be a shame. Platinum support, I think, is really going to help them over the next 6 months with a couple of really solid titles coming our way, but considering the lack of support from third parties, it does seem to me that the Wii U is still in a very precarious position. Okay, folks, that's me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the content patch. Before I go, I'd like to give you the OC Remix track of the day. There's about 5,000 Sonic remixes on the internet. Everybody knows that. It's a very popular game to remix because, of course, it had a great soundtrack back in the day, so updating it for the modern era is something that people have prioritized. There is one that stands out for me, though, probably one of my personal favorites. I don't think that's an opinion that's shared by everyone. This is a track that actually had mixed opinion on OC Remix, but I like it an awful lot. It's a really nice change to an otherwise great track from the Mystic Cave Zone. Now, the original composer for this was Masato Nakamura. Excellent composer indeed. The remixer is Beat Drop. The name of this track is Strip Mine. Some really interesting production choices on this track. Hopefully you enjoyed it as much as I do. Very funky, nice stabby feel to it. And of course you can download it for free in the description below this video. My name has been TotalBiscuit. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.